Good morning, everyone. This is John with Gun Deals, and today we're taking a look at the often requested and possibly the best optic that Sightmark makes. This is the Sightmark Wolverine FSR. But before we get into the video, if you don't know, Gun.Deals is a website that provides you with links to some of the best products and prices in the industry. Whatever it is that you happen to be looking for, go ahead and check them out first. They probably have a link to it for the best possible price. Now, very importantly, they don't buy or sell anything. They don't take your money. They merely point you in the right direction. Once again, that is Gun.Deals. Now, while you're here, go ahead and like, share, and subscribe, as all of that is free and does help us out quite a bit. Also, go ahead and comment your favorite toothpaste flavor in the comments down below. Now, getting into full disclosure on the Sightmark Wolverine, we paid our own money for this optic, and we have absolutely no relationship with Sightmark whatsoever. Now, these optics are fairly budget. They're definitely in that budget tier of red dots. You can find them usually for under 150 bucks. Somewhere between 100 and 120 is kind of where you should be looking for if you want to get a good deal on it. Now, getting into specifics on the Wolverine, this is a red dot. Now, the FSR is the full-size version, and then they have a slightly smaller version of the optic that's a little smaller, a little lighter, called the CSR, which I imagine is the compact size red dot, and this is the full-size red dot. So the FSR is the one that we're taking a look at today, and it is a little bigger and heavier than the CSR. Now, this is a 2 MOA red dot featuring a purported battery life of up to 1 million hours on the lowest setting, and then on setting 6, around 50,000 hours. And then if you're all the way maxed out on the red dot, you have exactly 900 hours of battery life. Now, that's actually not too far off what you're going to get from other red dots, because again, that 50,000 hour battery life is usually at like the middle setting or sometimes even the lowest setting. So again, as you go higher up in the brightness range, you are going to drastically lower your battery life. Now, speaking of the battery, this is a AA battery. This is a side-loading AA battery. Very easy to find and source, very cheap. It is going to add a little bit of bulk as it is kind of just hanging off the side of the optic. But again, the trade-off there is we probably all have a lot of AA's laying around. Now, getting back to the battery life for just a minute, unfortunately, this optic does not come with a auto on, auto off, or any sort of motion sensing technology. It does have an automatic off, so it won't just kill your battery if you forget to turn it off. However, it does not have an automatic on. So every time you want to use the optic, you need to push one of the 2 rubberized buttons here on the side to get that reticle to come back on. Now, getting into some of the other external features, it does come with a riser plate for a lower 1/3 co-witness. At least that's what it feels like to me. And then if you don't want that, you can take out the riser plate and have kind of a low mount if you were putting it on like an AK or something that already has a very low comb height, so you don't need a riser. But again, it is there. Now, technically, they do have night vision settings. I have not checked out the night vision settings on the optic, but we'll get into that in just a minute. The mount itself is actually pretty decent. You get a fairly large, substantial cross bolt, not a particularly large clamping surface, but overall I was able to get 45 inch-pounds on the cross bolt without issue, without coming close to stripping it out or anything else like that. The mount itself is fairly well designed with the spacer. It's fairly robust and it works fairly well. And as we'll get into later, it did hold 0 to an acceptable level. Getting into some of the other parts of the body, you might notice that this is a larger objective lens. That's because this is a 28mm red dot, so it is larger than your standard T1, T2 style micro red dots with a 20mm window. However, keep in mind that it does have a lot of bulk around the glass. So while, yes, you can see more through the optic, it does also occlude a lot more of your vision, having the much larger body style. Now, really, other than that, the only couple things we need to talk about on the outside of the body is that most of it is covered in this very nice rubberized coating, which will protect it from scratches and take some of the impact from bumps and so on and so forth. You do have capped windage and elevation, which are in half MOA increments. It worked very well for me. I didn't have any issues with that. They are captured as well with these little rubber grommets. Now, these look like aluminum protection, but this is really just part of that rubber overmold. So these aren't like aluminum ridges that are going to really protect them like you'll find on other optics. However, again, it is something and it does work at least a little bit. Of course, we have our side loading AA battery, and then our 2 adjustments. We just have a plus arrow or a up arrow and a down arrow for adjusting your brightness. Now, getting into the glass quality and the reticle / emitter on the Wolverine FSR, the glass quality is actually what I would consider to be very good for a red dot. It looks very natural. There's almost no tint to it whatsoever, which is nice. So if you're used to seeing like a very aggressive blue notch filter, this does have some minor color shift to it, but it is very, very minor. So overall, I would say the optical quality looks quite good. On top of that, the dot itself gets very, very bright, and it is a fairly precise, just simple 2 MOA dot. It looks very good to my eyes. Now, I don't have an astigmatism, so most dots look pretty good to me, and this one here is no different. Even under magnification, the dot itself, it looks very uniform. It looks very crisp, very precise for just a 2 MOA dot. However, it does have an issue, and this is kind of an issue that plagues some other optics as well, is that the emitter refresh rate is tied to the brightness level. So when you get up to the higher brightness level, especially the top 2 brightness levels, you have a very perfect refresh rate, very, very fast, and you'll never notice it moving left to right. It looks like a very solid laser beam. But when you go on to the lower brightness levels, again, anything outside of the top 2, you're going to notice that refresh rate starts to get very choppy. And as you transition from target to target or just move it around in front of your face, you can see that the emitter is turning on and off, 20, 30, 40 times a second, whatever it actually happens to be. But just know that it does have a noticeable refresh rate issue when you're not towards the top end of the brightness level. Now, when I was outside in full sunlight, usually I had it on like 1 setting below or maybe even 2 settings below max brightness, and it really wasn't all that bad. But again, if you're using it in like dusk or low light situations or something like that, you are definitely going to notice that the refresh rate on the emitter is not all that great. If you're in full daylight, if you're already at the top end of the brightness levels, again, not really going to be that big of an issue to you. Now, if I haven't mentioned it already, weight on the Wolverine FSR comes in at 12.3 ounces, which is pretty darn heavy for just a red dot for an unmagnified optic. It's not quite the heaviest red dot out there like the Romeo 8T is, but it is going to be very heavy compared to a lot of other smaller micro-style red dots. Now, that in and of itself isn't really that big of an issue if it's just a red dot only gun or red dot plus magnifier and you don't have a ton of other stuff on here. You're probably not going to be using like a PEC or something up front with an optic that's really not all that great for night vision use to begin with. But again, it is just something to note that it is a much bigger, heavier optic. And unfortunately, it is missing the Motac auto on, auto off technology that you'll find with other optics, which is a little bit disappointing considering that it is in the same price category as a lot of other optics are, even in a similar size and weight. So if we were going to compare it briefly to the Sig Romeo 7, which is an optic that I personally really like, comes in really about the same weight. This one here has a slightly larger 30mm objective lens, a 30mm window. This one here also has a less obtrusive body and still has the side-loading AA battery, right at about the same weight. Auto on, auto off technology, as well as the emitter, is not tied to the brightness level, so the emitter refresh rate is very good throughout the entire illumination range versus only good at the top end. Now, all that being said, when it comes to actually using the Wolverine FSR, it was perfectly fine, very usable. The dot is very crisp. It gets more than bright enough. It looks good under magnification. The glass quality itself is good. There's very little warping. There's very little magnification, distortion, anything like that. It's very bright, very easy to use in basically everything outside of night vision use. Again, it does just have a few little downsides and a few features that it's missing when compared to other competitive options, and it is going to be on the heavier side of things. So if it had motion activation or auto on, auto off technology, that would be a huge plus and also allow it to save some of that battery life. And if the emitter was not tied to the illumination settings, so the refresh rate was very constant throughout the entire illumination range, that would also be a large bonus as well. Now, before we go any further, I should mention that we did do some durability testing on the optic as well as zero retention test on the optic because it is billed as a, durable optic, which fortunately it is. So we did 3 rounds at 100 yards on a steel target just to make sure that we were already on target. They dropped on top of the optic, did another 3 rounds to make sure that we were still on target, did another drop on the side of the optic, then did another 3 rounds again at 100 yards just to make sure that zero had not experienced a gross shift. Now, fortunately, there was basically no shift in zero whatsoever. The optic really didn't take any damage either. A lot of the rubberized coating did get scuffed up and it is dirty now, but other than that, the optic is in basically perfect condition. So as far as durability and zero retention goes, again, remember I have the crossbolt torque down to 45 inch-pounds, which is perfectly fine. All of that seems to work together quite well. Again, when we compare it to other optics in a similar price category, a similar size and weight, that sort of thing, it is just lacking a few key features. Now, It's still not a bad optic. It was very easy to use. If you like bigger windows, this does have a little bit of a bigger window. Now, keep in mind that the body is pretty chunky and does obscure a lot of your other vision. So while, yeah, it has a bigger window, the body itself is also kind of chunky, so there is definitely a trade-off there. But even still, it was still a very easy optic to use. It was very easy to use in odd positions, unconventional shooting, on the ground, around targets. So as far as shooting performance and durability on the optic goes, I'm actually perfectly happy with it. I think it did a very good job. It does all of the red dot sort of things fairly well. It's just a little bit behind the curve to more modern options, more feature-packed options, if you will. Not that it's a bad red dot in any way. If you have one of these and it's working perfectly fine for you, that's all good. You don't need to swap it out right away. If you're looking at picking one of these up, it's still a decent option. It's maybe not the most ideal option on the market. Still a good option, though, and if you pick one up, find one on a good deal, what have you, it is going to perform quite well. Just know that there are some downsides to it. So, with all that out of the way, guys, let me know what you guys think of the Sightmark Wolverine FSR. If there's any sort of other Sightmark optics that I should check out. I know they have like their M-Spec or whatnot, kind of EOTech looking clones. But again, let me know if there's anything like that that you want me to check out in the future. With all that out of the way, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed. I will see you in the next one. Peace off.
You